Hi, welcome back. I hope I'm not taking too many breaks. I just thought I'd make it a little more digestible for y'all. Um, so, let's keep going and talking about the snowman's reactions to things and his expressions, because they're fun. Again, I'm always suggesting things if you have more time on your hands than you know what to do with. But if you go through and kind of freeze frame some of his expressions, it's really fun. Because I did these things. I did these for you to tell you what's fun to do. So throughout these attempts, the snowman's expressions range from determined to concerned to frustrated. Noticed he's never sad or in pain. The closest he comes to either of these is when his jackhammer goes on the fritz, and he looks concerned before his face falls off. I love sometimes deconstructing animated cartoons because the sentences that come out of your mouth are ridiculous. So this fear is not fear of rejection or low self-esteem, which will kind of be common plights for the heroes of future Pixar films. It's kind of simply fear about what is about to happen to his face. He is an object, so his face does not behave like a human's, and it can fall off and rearrange itself in order to keep us laughing without, detriment to him. He's a bit like Mr. Potato Head. You can pick it up. So the snowman appears to be cognizant of that fact, so what he dreads is something we can anticipate with glee. We know it's not going to hurt him, and we know it's going to be funny. And so this saves us from feeling like sadists, other than the fact that he is an object and, according to the rules established, not easily harmed. So we don't feel like sadists because he's not going to be harmed, and because he's an angry character and therefore inherently less sympathetic. And to make it worse, before each of his ideas, he has this overconfident eyebrow wiggle that he does towards the camera. This eyebrow wiggle. It's as if he's attempting to try and tell the audience, I've got it! And every time he fails. So it's this hubris that makes him a fool on top of being angry and sexually driven. And so he's just kind of this hot mess of negative things as opposed to sympathetic things. You notice I get really fascinated with wiggles and jiggle, various things. Maybe I just like saying it. I don't know. I think they give him personality. So during these exploits, we are given a proxy in the happy figures watching the snowman, because they're kind of these brief static shots of them looking vaguely concerned. So they're a bit more rational, it seems, than the snowman, and while not very dramatic, these shots reveal that they're kind of ambivalent to the snowman. They're not overly concerned about him. And they're curious because he is taking really extreme lengths to get out of this snow globe, and it's kind of funny to watch. But they aren't really fully invested. They're not rooting for him or rooting against him. They're kind of not cliquey, but they're also not loving. And one of my favorite jokes of the film is that if you notice one of the palm trees just never pays attention. He's just this kind of happy little palm tree in the background, bobbing up and down. Even when things look bad, he keeps doing that. And so he's like the music. He's this kind of joke in the film that indicates a hilarious indifference to the snowman's plight and kind of reminds you of the intended tone of the film. So he's that's his function, the snowman. Not the snowman, this palm tree. I'm assuming he's a he. I don't know. Meanwhile, the bored beach babe kind of sits there and looks at her fingernails and just could not care less about the snowman. And so it kind of again indicates this is not Romeo and Juliet. She's bored. She is kind of does not think the snowman worthy of much more than that wave, and it shows that she's actually shallow and doesn't really care. And so if he can't get out of the snow globe for her, he's not worth her time. And if we're human beings with some rational bones in our body, we know that therefore she's not kind of a romantic partner worth fighting for, yet he does. And so the climax of the film is also the film's technological climax. So at this point, the entire Sunny crowd, except the happy palm tree I indicated, is watching. And since the snowman has just landed himself backwards due to the accident with a flamethrower, their sudden attention indicates that something larger is about to happen. And so the snowman follows up his flamethrower idea with a pile of TNT, which is the most dramatic idea yet and the most traditional of cartoon cliches. If you, again, going back to Looney Tunes, characters like Wile E. Coyote would frequently get shipped and use various weapons and tools like TNT, so it's kind of a throwback to that. And this gag is also given more screen time as the camera tracks right to reveal the snowman with a trigger hiding behind his plastic igloo. So unsurprisingly, the explosion backfires. Instead of breaking the glass, it sends the world within the snow globe into chaos with a dramatic whirlwind of snowflakes. And these snowflakes are the most advanced use of particle systems yet, and getting them to behave naturally was the most difficult problem faced in the short. And so the new technology is a reminder that this film is still a learning tool for the studio, and the team is working on their effects as they study story structure. It also shows the potential of cartoons. They can have technical aims along with the goal of making people laugh, and every choice in this film can also be seen as an experiment and an early education in comedy. So the explosion is the climax of the snowman scheming sequence, but it is not the climax of the film. Instead, it is a turning point, and the final act is the build-up and execution of one final joke that takes advantage of the entire story that has come before it. So after the snow has settled, it is revealed that the explosion has moved the snow globe to the very edge of the shelf. As the snowman looks at the glass to see what happened, his leaning over causes the snow globe to tip off the shelf. See, you could just follow my hand gestures and you don't even have to watch the film. So while this moment is arguably no more dangerous than any of his stunts from before, the way the gag is presented gives it higher stakes than the previous stunts. First of all, before the snow globe is even tipped, there is a wide shot from below the shelf that shows how high it is from the snowman's perspective, and how close the snow globe is to the edge. So we see the height, and our fear can be visceral. It's like when we get the point of view shot through Tinny's eyes of the baby. And meanwhile, the snowman kind of reinforces this because his expression is one of pure terror. And we get a change in the Sunny group because, except the happy palm tree, that are all watching with more concern than before. So these are all subtle things to heighten the dramatic moment. And so with the stakes even higher than before, we're invested in how the snowman is going to get out of this. And since it's a cartoon, we do assume that he's going to survive, but the mystery becomes how he will do that. And as the snowman runs around his snow globe after it falls, he runs like a hamster. And as he is doing that, the solution appears out of nowhere, and that on the floor of the snow globe is an emergency exit in place of a plug that would normally be in a snow globe. I say that with confidence, but I actually did not know much about snow globe structure until this analysis. And there is always a plug, so this emergency exit is actually a gag about that. And so, again, the emergency exit wouldn't be the way it is done in the real world of snow globe design, but it is a comedic solution that for the moment, we accept, and it becomes part of our laugh that it's so unlikely. And so he ends up letting himself out of the snow globe via this emergency exit, and he starts floating gently down. And so he gives the audience a real smile for the first time in the entire film because he's finally out. So he's a little bit human. I'll give him that. So ultimately, though, the escape exit is about as useful as it is likely, because victory is short-lived, and while we watch a reaction shot of the Sunny group, an off-screen noise points to something going wrong. And the next shot is a copy of the very first shot of the film, except instead of grumpily standing in the snow globe, the snowman is grumpily sitting in a fishbowl that broke his fall. So it traps him just like the snow globe, and so his escape was for naught. So the irony is amusing because he's trapped just like before, plus he's glaring at us just like before, and this again kind of slight alteration makes him even less sympathetic because a fish comes by and he glares at the fish and scares it. So he's not even nice to the innocent. It's not just like he's cruel, and therefore undeserving of our love. And so the symmetry between the story's beginning and the story's end makes the film a full story, points to kind of a grand plan. It's not just a series of gags, it is a full story. And now that the snowman has come full circle, we have closure, and the film could end here, but instead the filmmakers torture the snowman even more and take advantage of the symmetry for the second time, because in a brief moment it looks like the snowman's efforts may have been rewarded, because there's a mermaid in the fishbowl who looks exactly like the beach babe from on top. And so even though he's trapped in the snow globe, he could have what he wanted all along. But then as he runs towards the mermaid, the snow globe falls on top of him, and the hole created by the emergency exit falls. He goes through it, so he's trapped again inside the snow globe, and he's just as trapped as before, just even closer to the mermaid. So he's even closer to what he wants, but he cannot have it. So he is extra grumpy at the end because he tried so hard for nothing, and it's kind of staring at him in the face. So, let's talk about that ending. So while it is an unhappy ending, much like Red's dream, it's a funny unhappy ending. The snowman did not ultimately deserve the girl, and his unlikely misfortune is therefore amusing as opposed to tragic. During Red, as opposed to Knick Knack, the audience rooted for the unicycle because he was clever and his isolation seemed unfair. He was an underdog, and our emotional investment lay in his success. Meanwhile, the melancholic atmosphere reinforced this disappointment. Knick Knack is different. The snowman is never likable, and we care more about being amused than seeing him get what he wants. Our emotional investment is in seeing the ways the animators come up with new gags to get him out of the snow globe, and we don't really care about whether he succeeds. It's more about the animators than the character. And we take joy in the ending because it is yet another clever bait and switch that plays with our expectations. We actually like it when that happens. And additionally, the atmosphere never switches to melancholy like it does in Red's dream. The music, colors, and lightings all remain bright. They never want us to care about the snowman or share in his disappointment, so they never create a world for us to enter that would do that. No lesson is ultimately learned. This is not a moral tale. We don't come out of it better people. Whereas, if you think about it, Luxo taught us to explore, Red's dream taught us to dream, Tintoy taught us about empathy, Knick Knack teaches us that there are many ways not to escape a snow globe. And the filmmakers, because they didn't want us to learn, the goal was to have a good time. And the only way this works is if we feel safe to laugh at the gags, because the humor is at the expense of an antagonist rather than a victim. And with that safety established, the filmmakers can feel free to make us laugh, and they do. And the lack of empathy in this context benefits the film, but empathy for and investment in the characters are central pillars of the Pixar brand. So while Knick Knack masters the basics of comedy, future comedies take up the challenge of integrating empathy for the protagonists while trying to maintain the same margins of safety. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. So Knick Knack is a very fun film, despite my constant berating of the snowman himself. It is a very fun film. It is a expertly crafted film. It is a complete film. But that lack of empathy makes it not very Pixarian. And so we're going to see how they handle that in Lifted, which actually will be our first film tackled that came out after Toy Story and came out before a feature. It's from 2006. I think you'll enjoy it. It's very silly. It tackles the horror genre again a little bit, but no creepy babies this time. And hopefully that'll be the last time I mention creepy babies. And yeah, I hope to see you next week. Take some time to go watch it. Go see Inside Out if you haven't yet. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.